So, I got something super cool for you today, Adrian. You know how we're always talking about tech evolution and stuff? Well, I thought we could dive into something that's literally changed the whole tech landscape: Linux.
Oh man, you have no idea how excited I am about this one. Like, Linux is just, it's absolutely incredible. And I've been, you know, working with it for years and years. And the whole story behind it is just fascinating.
I figured you'd be pumped about this one. Um, for our episode of the history and evolution of Linux, I really want to understand how this whole thing started and, you know, became what it is today.
That's exactly what we need to talk about. Because, Linux has this amazing journey that's just, well, it's absolutely revolutionary. And the way it's transformed everything from phones to supercomputers is just mind-blowing. You know what I mean?
I've actually been super curious about that because I keep hearing about Linux being everywhere, but I don't think most people really understand how or why.
Oh, totally, totally. And that's what makes this story so incredible. Because, we're literally surrounded by Linux every single day, and most people don't even realize it. And I can't wait to break it all down for you.
So, let's start at the beginning. I've heard the name Linus Torvalds thrown around a lot, but who exactly is this guy?
Oh man, Linus is just, he's like this absolute genius who started it all. You see, back in 1991, he was just like, this regular computer science student at the University of Helsinki in Finland, right? And he was working with this operating system called Minix, which was basically, well, it was used for teaching purposes.
So what made him decide to create his own system?
So here's the thing. Linus was really frustrated with the limitations of Minix, and he wanted to create something that could work better with his new computer. It was this 386 processor he'd just gotten. So he started writing this, well, what he thought would be just this small little project, right? He even posted about it on this online message board. And get this, he actually said it was just going to be a hobby thing. Can you believe that?
Wait, so he didn't actually plan for it to become this huge thing?
Not at all. That's what makes it so incredible. He literally wrote in his message that it was just going to be this small, simple kernel. And he even said it probably wouldn't be anything as professional as GNU. But you know what happened? He released this first version 0.01, and well, it was super basic, right? It could barely do anything. But it worked. And the amazing thing is, he made it freely available for others to look at and modify.
Hmm. So how did people actually respond to this first version?
Oh man, the response was just, it was absolutely incredible. Other developers started getting really excited about it. And they began contributing their own code, suggesting improvements. The thing that really made it special was that Linus was totally open to collaboration. He wasn't trying to, control everything himself. He was just, well, he was happy to let other people help make it better.
So, what made Linux different from other operating systems at the time? Why did it catch on so quickly?
Oh man, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the whole Linux story. You see, the real game changer was when Linus decided to release Linux under the GNU General Public License, or GPL, right? And this was just, it was absolutely revolutionary at the time.
What exactly does this GPL thing mean?
So, the GPL is this amazing, well, it's this license that basically says anyone can use, modify, and share the code freely. But here's the really cool part. If you modify the code and distribute it, you have to share your changes too. And this created this incredible, this whole ecosystem of developers who could work together and build on each other's improvements.
So how did this affect the development of Linux?
Oh my goodness, it just completely transformed everything. Suddenly you had this massive community of developers from all over the world, right? And they were all contributing their ideas, their code, their improvements. You know what I mean? It wasn't just Linus anymore. It became this huge collaborative effort.
And all these people were just working for free?
Well, that's the beauty of open source. Some were doing it as a hobby, some were working for companies that used Linux, but the important thing was that everyone could benefit from everyone else's work. And this philosophy of sharing and collaboration, it just it created this amazing momentum. Like the improvements and innovations just kept coming and coming.
So, how did they manage to coordinate all these different people working on it?
Right. So this is where things get really interesting. Linus, he developed well, this really efficient system for managing contributions. And he became known for being this really good, like, project manager, you know? He would review code, make decisions about what gets included, and keep everything organized. The community developed these tools and processes that are still used today in open source development.
So what happened next? Like, how did Linux start spreading beyond just, the initial group of developers?
Oh man, this is where things get really exciting. So, like, in the early days, around 1992, 1993, we started seeing these things called distributions, right? And they were absolutely game-changing for Linux.
What exactly is a distribution?
Right. So basically, a distribution is well, it's a complete package of Linux that makes it actually usable for regular people. You see, the really cool thing is that some developers realized that, not everyone could piece together all the different parts needed to run Linux. So they started creating these complete systems with everything included.
Were there many of these distributions?
Oh my goodness, yes. Like Slackware came out in 93 and then Debian showed up, which was it was absolutely huge. And Red Hat started becoming really popular too. You know what I mean? Each distribution had its own special focus and community.
So what made these distributions so important for Linux's growth?
The thing is, these distributions made Linux accessible to so many more people. Like before, you needed to be this really technical person to even get Linux running. But now, suddenly, you had these complete systems that someone could just, install and use. And each distribution started developing its own tools and package management systems.
How did the developer community respond to this?
Oh, it was just incredible. Like, you started seeing this explosion of development activity. People were creating all sorts of applications, tools, and improvements to everything. And the really amazing thing was that each distribution they served different needs, right? Some focused on servers, others on desktop users, and this diversity just made Linux stronger and stronger.
What about companies? Did they start noticing Linux during this time?
Absolutely. Like, companies started realizing that Linux was this really stable, reliable system that they could actually use in serious environments. And what's really fascinating is that some companies even started building their entire business around supporting Linux. Red Hat, for example, they basically created this whole new business model around open source software.
So when did the big companies really start taking Linux seriously?
Oh man, it's such an amazing story. Like, around the late 90s and early 2000s, we started seeing these massive companies. And I mean massive companies like IBM, Oracle, and even Microsoft eventually, right? They all started embracing Linux in their own ways.
What made them decide to make that switch?
Well, the thing is, Linux just proved itself to be incredibly reliable and super cost-effective for running servers. And what's really fascinating is that companies started realizing they could modify Linux to fit their exact needs, right? Like, they didn't have to rely on proprietary software anymore.
Were there any particular areas where Linux really took off?
Oh my goodness, yes! The server market it was absolutely revolutionary. Like, today most of the internet basically runs on Linux servers. And you know what's really mind-blowing? Even the supercomputers. Like, practically all of the world's top supercomputers are running Linux now.
What about mobile devices? I've heard Linux has something to do with Android.
Oh, this is where it gets super exciting. So, Android is actually built on top of the Linux kernel, right? And when you think about it, that means Linux is powering billions of devices worldwide. Like, every single Android phone out there is basically running Linux at its core.
What made Google choose Linux for Android?
The thing is, Linux gave them this incredibly stable foundation to build on, and it was totally free to use. Plus, they could modify it however they wanted. And And what's really amazing is that this decision helped Linux reach so many people who don't even realize they're using it. You know what I mean?
Has this corporate adoption changed Linux in any way?
Oh, absolutely. Like, these big companies have contributed so much back to Linux. They've added features, fixed bugs, and improved performance in ways that benefit everyone. And and the really cool thing is that all these improvements are still open source, right? So the entire community gets to benefit from this corporate investment.
What's your take on where Linux stands today, like in the current tech landscape?
Oh man, Linux is just, it's absolutely everywhere right now. Like, it's not just running on servers anymore, right? We're talking about, and this is really mind-blowing, everything from tiny IoT devices to like massive cloud infrastructures.
How many different versions of Linux are out there now?
The thing is, there are hundreds of different distributions, and each one has its own special focus. Like, Ubuntu is super popular for desktop users, right? Then you've got specialized ones like Red Hat Enterprise Linux for businesses, and even specialized distributions for security testing, like Kali Linux.
And what about the desktop market? Has Linux made progress there?
Oh, this is actually really exciting. So, Linux has been steadily gaining ground, especially with, and this is really interesting, with people who are becoming more privacy conscious, right? And with things like Steam supporting Linux gaming, we're seeing more users making the switch.
Um, what do you see happening with Linux in the future?
The future is just, it's looking absolutely incredible. Like, with the rise of containerization and cloud computing, Linux is becoming even more crucial. And you know what's really fascinating? We're seeing this huge push towards edge computing, right? Linux is perfectly positioned for that because it's so lightweight and adaptable.
Are there any challenges Linux needs to overcome?
Well, the thing is, there are always challenges, right? Like, we're still working on making Linux more user-friendly for everyday users, and there's this ongoing need to keep up with new hardware. But you know what? The amazing thing about Linux is that it has this incredible community that's always working to solve these problems.
And AI development? Is Linux playing a role there?
Oh my goodness, yes! Like, practically all major AI development is happening on Linux platforms. And what's super exciting is that Linux is evolving to better support these new workloads, right? The community is constantly adding features to make Linux even better for AI and machine learning tasks.
So after everything we've discussed today, what would you say is like the biggest takeaway about Linux's journey?
Oh man, you know what really stands out to me? It's just, it's absolutely incredible how this project that started with like one student in Finland has completely transformed the tech world. And not just transformed it, right? But it's literally become the backbone of modern computing.
The whole open source aspect really seems to have been key to all of this, hasn't it?
Exactly. That's precisely what made Linux so special. Like, the fact that it was open source from the beginning meant that thousands of developers could contribute and make it better. And you know what's amazing? This model has influenced so many other projects, right? It's completely changed how we think about software development.
So, any final thoughts for our listeners about Linux?
Well, the thing is, Linux is just, it's not just an operating system anymore, right? It's become this amazing symbol of what people can achieve when they work together. And I really believe that as technology continues to evolve, Linux is going to play an even bigger role in shaping our digital future. Like, it's just incredible to think about where it might be in another 30 years.
Thanks for taking us through this fascinating journey through Linux's history and evolution. Until next time, everyone.